This is Shiting welcoming you to Backstage, the life behind the music. This is an online series of conversations with pianists, an exploration of their remarkable artistic lives as performers, teachers, and advocates for music. Through talking, I hope to shed some light on their process, to get a glimpse into some of their music making, the real work that takes place before they or their students step out onto the stage. Thank you so much for being on this with me. I'm so excited to talk to you about your recordings, your projects, and
Great pleasure.
I was just actually listening to your one of your recordings, the Goldberg Variations, before we started to talk, and your performances are so creative in terms of the varied repeats, such as in Goldberg Variations and Bach French Suite number 5. And I was wondering, do you improvise in performance or work out variants and embellish in advance, or a combination of both? What is your process of doing that?
Well, I've always been an improviser. Um, and so I don't mind taking chances in public. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good at it. You can't do this without risks. You know, there's no shortcut. But the risks are sometimes fun. And sometimes, you know, people have gotten the idea that I can get my way out of a tough situation by improvising. And I've had to do that from time to time because harpsichords are, for example, not always reliable, and they break down or the notes don't play or something, and I have to re-improvise something, or I get to a hall where the harpsichord is one that I'm not familiar with, and I discover that it only goes to high D or high E or high F instead of G and so forth, and I think, oh, well, there goes that ornament. I have to improvise another one. And so I don't mind doing that. If I know I'm going to have something that's an important improvisation, say like cadenza to a Mozart concerto or something like that, or in the case of a recording, you know, like the Goldbergs, I work it out ahead of time. So, because the skill of writing ornaments or writing decorations is a different skill than making them up on the spot. Sometimes they work, you know, together, but very often it's a different skill. And I've worked with a lot of students, for example, some of whom have one skill and some of whom have the other. And they don't always work together. And when you have an important thing to do, um, you want to get it right. And you want to make it seem like an improvisation, but you want to have some idea what to do.
What are some of your principles you follow when you are doing the varied repeats? Because when I listen to you, it sounds so unexpected always, and it's refreshing and it's exciting, and it makes the piece more full in depth.
Well, thank you. That's a nice compliment. Um, you know, there's a wonderful sentence in Philip Emanuel Bach's treatise in which he says, if you're going to decorate something, at least improve it. Um, and so my feeling is, all right, a lot of people have been discouraged by this kind of remark because who am I to improve Bach? But that's not the point. I mean, Bach expected people to make decorations, and he would have done them himself. So what he meant was the element of surprise that you're talking about is, I'm delighted that you responded to that because that's what it's supposed to do. And if the character of the piece can stand a little bit of amplification, let's say, or intensification or dramatization, or let's say furtherance of the character that has started out, um, then I consider that I've done all right, and I've surprised you sufficiently, which is the point.
Are there some pieces that you just stay away and then you think it's not appropriate to make embellishments, make it more complicated?
Well, in principle, no, because all the great composers everybody from at least, a long time prior to Bach, but Bach and Handel, Scarlatti, Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, even Mendelssohn, Chopin, and Liszt and Brahms and all the rest of them were all great improvisers. And, by the 19th century, I think that at least in instrumental writing, there came to be a certain degree of distrust that composers had for performers, like they weren't going to do the right thing. So they began to write down more and more specifically the ornaments they wanted, the dynamics they wanted, tempos and everything else. That doesn't mean they didn't improvise or they didn't encourage good people to improvise. And so it doesn't matter to me. I don't have any principles about that. I have no ethics. I have no morals, except that if somebody, some great composer or somebody else, has written something beautiful, you don't want to mess it up. Yeah. So I do have that as a guiding principle.
Yes. I was listening to Bach Brandenburg concertos that you recorded, and I know that you have recorded them many times and you've played them many times. Yes. And what do you think it's important to keep in mind when you're performing the same music for many years?
Well, it always changes. Life doesn't go backwards. And, I'm in my 70s now, and I learned the Fifth Brandenburg, for example, when I was in high school, when I was a teenager. That's a lot of years playing that piece, and I've never gotten tired of it. And each time, it seems to me an improvisation of a different sort. I've gotten more nervy about it in recent years. I've also begun to understand the construct of it a lot better. For example, the cadenza, famous cadenza in the Fifth Brandenburg, is a balance between a situation where Bach has set up the dominant key as stable and set up the tonic key as unstable. That's a very artificial situation. How he gets suspense by doing that is a miracle, an absolute miracle, which is why I do not mess with the timing of this piece at all. It needs to have this balance back and forth. And he gets stuck in this, and by the end of it, we should be concerned about how the devil is he going to get out of this. It's a harmonic problem. It's very suspenseful, and he decorates it tremendously with all kinds of runs and fancy stuff, so forth, to distract the listener. Or finally, he goes from A in the bass to this deceptive cadence at the end, to the B minor chord, 5-chord to 6-chord, famous deceptive cadence. Well, the more I played that, the more important that moment seemed. So in my later years, you hear more and more of how important that moment is. Well, that's one aspect of, let's say, how the thing has grown on me over the years. Mm-hmm. And then I've gotten more and more, nervy. And one of the things I love to do when I'm improvising decorations is to surprise all the people around me. Not only the audience, but to surprise the violinist and the oboist and the flutist and so forth, to see, keep them on their toes. There have been days, for example, well, I'll tell you about the first time when I was playing a Mozart concerto at music camp, right? I was 17 years old, and I was playing the famous C major Mozart concerto, and we had just scheduled the second and third movements for the final day of camp, and everybody was there, the parents and that, and we made a big success out of these two movements. And we came out for our 25th bow at the end of the concert. Wasn't that good, but and the conductor said to me, well, how about the first movement? And I said, I was a teenager. I said, well, sure, why not? We hadn't practiced it. I hadn't practiced it. Lena hadn't conducted it. The orchestra never saw it before. Well, so we lit into it, and the audience was delighted they're going to have an extra thing. And I thought halfway through this movement, oh my God, I'm going to need a cadenza for this thing. Had not given it a moment's thought. And so I picked a piece the orchestra had been playing during this season. Turned out that the Rossini Italian in Algiers had a passage that was just like what was needed for the big crescendo and so forth. So I made up a lot of stuff. Conductor was in an unbelievable state because he didn't know how it was going to end, how long it was going to be, what the hell I was doing, That was fun. I enjoyed that. That was an interesting adventure.
Was that your first time on stage trying to make something up on the spot?
No, I don't doubt that it was. I always made up stuff.
I see. Okay, I know you have played collaboratively with some great partners over the years, including Guillaume.
I've been very lucky.
Yes. What stories do you have to tell about your experience working with them? And in your opinion, what are the most important qualities necessary for a good chamber player?
That's a big question. I would say you have to like each other. You have to like each other's music making. It's not always that you like the person, although many of the partners that I've had are the most adorable people, fabulous people. Among them, for example, Ani Kavafian or Paula Robeson or Carolyn Sense, Judy Mendenhall, or my wife Josephine, who I partnered with for many, many years, or Yo-Yo, or I've been very, very lucky playing with fabulous people. And I would say the willingness to work out something with your partner, not just to play. And I would say the listening part of that, listening component of that activity is almost more important than the playing component. That you want to know what it is that this person is likely to do or likely to want to do almost before he or she does it. Playing with Ani, for example, except maybe for an opening cue, I don't have to look at her. I never have to check and see what it is she's doing. And to me, that's disturbing on the platform anyway, when people look at each other and pretend that they're cooperating and so forth. We breathe together and we know, it's not as if we haven't rehearsed some of this stuff too. And to be able to not have too much of an ego so that you dictate where you should be listening. On the other hand, you should be able to provide leadership where it's needed. This is all up to Mozart, or up to Schubert or up to Bach as to what the roles of the various partners ought to be. I've played with people who I don't care for so much, and the personal likes and dislikes do not enter this at all. If you're playing with a professional, if you dislike the person that much, you shouldn't be playing with it in the first place. But you try and make the music happen, get inside the music and do what the music is asking you to do, and if to respond to whatever the character is to that piece as best you can, and as best as your partner seems to want to be able to. And sometimes your partner, if they're interesting players, they do surprising things. I like that. I suppose being an improviser, I don't mind picking up something on the spur of the moment, especially if it's an interesting idea. I love the partnership. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That to me is a wonderful way to spend your life. Mm-hmm. Same is true of playing a concerto. To me, a soloist, it doesn't seem to me all that interesting if he's just dictating to the orchestra all the time. Especially in a concerto of Mozart or Beethoven or Bach, so forth. These concertos are tremendously integrate the solo part with the players, and they're like, you know, a whole bunch of partners on stage.
Yeah, I think the great chamber music, you can't really tell who's the leader. Everyone is in it together.
Absolutely.
Group. I want to ask a little more about your Debussy project. What is the Debussy project, and how did it inspire you to start on this project?
Well, you know, as I was a kid, they told us, you got to be able to play anything. You know, you want to be a professional, you play everything. And believe me, I've been through a lot, and I've played all kinds of music, from early music, from medieval music to through more contemporary things, some very contemporary things. And I read, of course, Debussy, one of the greats, you know, and I played his piano pieces. And I read that, of course, I loved the violin piano sonata, the cello piano sonata. These are fabulous chamber pieces. And I read that he had written 3 sonatas at the end of his life and died before he could finish the series of 6. But he had written down the scoring for the last 3 sonatas. And the 4th one was to be for oboe, horn, and harpsichord. So to me, this was, that he died before he wrote that is a major tragedy, as far as I'm concerned. So it would have been an astonishing piece. He never wrote anything for harpsichord. In my research, I found that he, I think, never even heard a harpsichord. Not sure about that. But I thought this wrong has to be made right, you know. And so I thought, well, I'd love to hear what this combination sounds like in Debussy's music. So I transcribed a couple of pieces. We tried them out. 1 or 2 of them didn't work. I did them over again, so forth. It took some years to figure out how horn, oboe, and harpsichord could work together. And finally came up with a reasonable solution. We tried it out. We performed it a number of times, and we recorded it. Now I am so hooked on these pieces being played in this combination, I can't even hear the piano versions anymore properly. And I thought, okay, the International was nice enough to publish this thing. Let's try number 5. So somebody is playing this for the first time in a week or 2 out in Lake Tahoe, I believe. And I'm going to check on them, make sure they're doing it right. And I just finished the orchestration for number 6. It's absolutely fascinating project. And I had to go back to the Debussy research and track his plan of how he was proceeding on this design of doing the 6 sonatas and planning them all for a single evening. And there isn't any book on Debussy which does this. In other words, they say, yeah, he wrote this sonata, that sonata, and so forth, but they don't discuss the plan. And I put together this whole series of letters and documents about how this was a plan Debussy carried through for many years. Some of this I wrote up in my essays to the international publications. But I definitely got deeper into Debussy's head doing this thing, an unbelievably fascinating project.
You are also a wonderful teacher, and I was wondering, what are some of the main points and principles you try to emphasize in your teaching over the years?
Oh, I couldn't even begin with that. Some of it's unconscious. anything I think that people don't know is something that they need to be taught. And I'm working, of course, with Manhattan School undergrads and graduate students, and almost all of whom are terrific players and singers. But almost all of them don't know anything. They know their literature. They don't even know that very well. And when I ask my class, well, how many Mozart sonatas do you know? How many Bach chorale preludes do you know? How many Haydn quartets? To me, it is basic literature, Haydn symphonies or whatever. Very little. So I try and get people to listen to music. That to me is the main thing. Secondly, with a few exceptions, they can all read music. There are exceptions. There are people that play automatically, or play from fingers to instrument and don't hear in between. There are some of those. But most people can read music, and so they play what they see on the page. This is the beginning of a performance, not the end. So I need to teach kids what they need to know that isn't on the page. Traditions of style, rubato, expressivity, character, and of course ornamentation. And all these things were expected of performers by all the greats. They all said so. These are areas which they, on the whole, need help with. Take Bach, the gorgeous Bach suites. Everybody plays the Bach suites. They all love the Bach suites. Cellists, violinists, keyboard players, and so forth. They all, even players of other instruments, love the Bach suites. And people come into class playing these suites on, xylophones and marimbas and tubas and everything else, which is great. But they tend not to know why they're doing what they're doing. They tend not to know, for example, what the dance movements are. And if you know what the dance movements are, you know what the structure of the melody is. Otherwise, you see da-da-dee-da-dee-do-dee-do-do-dee-do-dee, and it all sounds like the melody to you. And then what you're doing with it is arbitrary instead of with some understanding. So all that takes time, energy, and a lot of humor, it seems to me. So the ongoing task is getting people to not play mechanically, not play empty-headedly, just by reading the notes, and to figure out what it is they need to know that isn't on the page. It's not that everything has to be changed. I shouldn't give that impression, because there's a lot of great stuff that Mozart and Bach and all these other greats put down on the page for us. But that's one of the things. And the other thing is I think largely about character. What action, what agenda does the person have who is speaking in this piece, whatever it is. And I think instrumentalists tend not to think about that at all. But they need to. It's not that you have to have a story, although sometimes that helps, I don't know. But you have to know, who is saying what and to whom, and why. And by doing that, you are allowing your influence to be felt through this piece. Some people think that's not a good thing. But in the long run, that needs to be there. And the aim, of course, is not to necessarily put yourself above the piece. That's not the point. but put yourself in the piece enough to show us what's there. And somebody has to do that. You know, otherwise I tell them, if you're not going to show us your way of doing this, we don't need you. You know, I can read music. I take the thing home, I look at it, I can figure that out. But there's no way I could possibly guess what it is you would bring to this piece, or how you would speak this piece or sing this piece. And that makes each performance exciting, in my view. I don't know, it's one set of ideas.
I think that wraps up all my questions for you today. I can't express how grateful I am to be able to speak with you over internet like this. I know it's dreadful that we have to stay home, but I think I'm very grateful for all the opportunities to talk with inspiring musicians like you. And I have to say, I've been listening to your recordings a lot these days, and you inspire me so much, and you inspired my teacher. That's how I got to know your projects, your work, and your writings, and all sorts of things. And
Well, you're very kind. Thank you. I would love to hear you play. You're a pianist, right?
Yes, yes.
And you have a fabulous teacher. Logan is a marvelous guy, very, very brilliant.